Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If I could ask you to take your seats, we've got quite a few available, so do please feel free to join us as we go into our last masterclass session of today. Well, as you know, of course, Eurobus Expo is all about bringing you up to date with the current developments and innovations in the bus and coach industry. And during this session, we've got a panel of specialists who'll be indulging in a little crystal ball gazing to consider how the future will shape up for the coach industry in the coming months and years. Their discussion is going to be chaired by Graham Vidler, CEO of the CPT. So I'm going to hand you over to him, put him in the driving seat. He'll bring you up to speed on what's happening today and then introduce you to the panel. So please welcome Graham Vidler.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to start with an overview of some research that CPT commissioned and published last month on the economic impact which our industry has. You might have heard some of this from my colleague Phil Smith earlier, but I just want to give you a bit more of an insight into why we did the research, what it tells us, and how we and the industry more generally can use it going forward. Oh, sorry. So what the research shows us is that there are three different ways in which you can measure the impact of coaches on the economy. And KPMG went away for us and researched those ways. In brief, you can look at what the coach industry pays itself and its supply chain. So much like any other industry, we employ people, we pay taxes, our workers pay taxes, they spend in local high streets and elsewhere in the economy. We have a big supply chain behind us. So that's area one. Area two is the fact that there are more than 1 million coach journeys every day, has a wide range of benefits for passengers and society more generally. It's great for passengers who've got connectivity that they wouldn't otherwise have at a price that they might not otherwise be able to afford. It's great for other road users because it's keeping vehicles off the road, it's freeing up congestion. It's great for communities because there's less environmental pollution, air quality is better, there's less of a contribution to global warming. And thirdly, and I think this is the thing which is most powerful when you look at our industry, is what our passengers do. Because we're not about the journey, we're about the destination. And when people get to their destination, when coach passengers get to their destination, they tend to spend quite a bit of money, whether it's on leisure, tourism activities, shopping, staying overnight in a hotel or other accommodation, et cetera, et cetera. So KPMG used those three lenses to really try and get to grips with what we know is a big, important industry, but to put some numbers around it to quantify it. And these are their headline findings for Great Britain. So that first way of measuring the impact of people in the industry itself, you've got a total of 6.4 billion a year of economic impact there. And that's made up of, most of that is taxes, wages, industry profit, and the investment we make into the supply chain. Lots of it is spent by our suppliers elsewhere in the supply chain, and lots of it is also spending by the people we employ, both in our operations directly and in the supply chain. So you've got an industry there which is 6.4 billion pounds in size, even if we consider nothing else. Secondly, when you start to estimate the value of people using the coach as opposed to not using the coach, you've got a further £2.5 billion of value. And that value comes in three main ways. Firstly, there is the value to the passenger themselves. They can go to places that they couldn't otherwise go, or they might be able to go there more affordably. £750 million there of value in that increased connectivity. You've got the benefits to other road users. So you've got less congestion, you've got less environmental pollution. So everybody else gains when some people choose to use the coach. Another £500 million of impact. And then you've got what economists call the option value. So if you ask people, do you value there being a coach network, even if you don't use it in any particular given year, they say, yeah, we do. and they attach a value to that, and KPMG can gross all of that up and say there's over £1 billion of value there in having a vibrant, flexible, accessible coach network across the country. So £2.5 billion of value there. The biggest impact, as I said, is what passengers do when they get to their destination. Because contrary to some people's popular belief, coach passengers spend quite a bit of money at their destination. And KPMG have taken all of that evidence and crunched all of the numbers, and they tell us that across Great Britain, coach passengers spend over £2 billion on shopping and leisure activities. They spend £3.5 billion on day trips to tourist sites, tourist destinations. They spend £2 billion on overnight stays. These are all domestic tourism. And then overseas visitors spend about £0.6 billion when they're travelling by coach around the country. So add all of that up, you get £8.3 billion, and you get that picture of the three different ways in which the coach industry makes such a positive impact on the UK economy. In our report and available on the website, we've also broken that down by region. So you've got the southwest here where you can see the impact in each of those three buckets for the region as a whole and for the West of England Combined Authority. And we've got versions of those mapped for Scotland, Wales and each English region, all available in the report, which is on our website. And that's just the more detailed breakdown of Southwest England in each of those categories. We also wanted to look at not just what happens now, but what could happen in future. And KPMG did a lot of research which looked at, well, how much do typical coach passengers spend and how many people are typically on a coach and what's the benefit of that, which, when we got them to simplify it down to the bare bones, gave us this result. If you can get a decent-sized coach load of passengers into a place, whether it's a city centre or a tourist destination or whatever it might be, each day, over the course of the year, that's £1 million being spent in your local economy. And we think that's a really powerful way of expressing the additional benefit that coach services could have in future. What we're doing at CPT at the moment is taking this report and the key findings around the country. We're talking to central government. More importantly in this context, we're talking to local authorities and a range of destinations, helping them to understand the contribution we make now, helping them understand the even bigger contribution that coach could make in future, and talking to them about the things that they could do through their local transport plans, for example, to make it much easier for us to do our job and to boost their local economies. We'd love to work with members across the country on doing that. Just get in touch with us if you've got a particular issue you want to raise with local politicians or the local council, or look at the material on our website, which will give you the facts and figures you need for your local region and will really help boost the case for coach wherever you are in the country, I believe. That's all I wanted to say by way of introduction. The rest of this session, I'm going to be joined by an expert panel who are going to discuss with me how this stacks up with their experience of the coach sector and give us their perspectives on the future of the industry. So if I could ask to join me on stage, Andrew Luckett, Director of BluMarbl. Yeah, let's give them a round of applause. Come on. Mike Newman, Founder and Director of B2Me, who's currently working with Birmingham City Council. Duncan Aspinall, MD of Holmeswood and freshly anointed Vice President of CPT. And Paul Sainthouse, MD of Dawsongroup and Chair of CPT's Supplier Commission. So we are going to have some audience Q&A shortly, so please start getting your questions ready, whether for me about my presentation or more importantly, I think, to this expert panel over here. But I just wanted to start by asking each of you for a very brief take on your perspective on the future of coach. I've painted a picture which, rightly, I believe, is positive about both what we do now and what more we could do in future. But I'd love to hear your perspective very, very briefly, just to get us started. I'll start with you, Paul, and then move along, if I may.
Yeah, of course. Good afternoon, everybody. I suppose we have a unique position in the industry of seeing things from a non-operator's perspective. And what I can tell you for a fact is that our coach fleet of 200 and odd haven't stood still all year. It's a great barometer for the industry, and we can be fairly confident that we can continue to invest. We listen to the rhetoric from the marketplace, and everybody tells us that there's an easily 3-year visibility of buoyancy within the market, which is reassuring and gives me the kind of message that I need in order to continue to invest. But I think other signs as well are looking very positive, and the fact that we're seeing large established transport operators investing in the coach sector in a way they probably never have before, and also private equity coming into the marketplace and seeing the coach sector as investable are great barometers for what's going on. And if I'm honest, these people really do look at these things closely before they put the money in. So there's been a lot of scrutiny, and if they're happy to provide that scrutiny and then to invest as well, it's a very good sign for the industry. So I think the future at the moment is looking very good.
Thank you, Paul. Mike, I'll turn to you now. I know you're working closely with Birmingham City Council, and just wonder what it looks like from that perspective.
I think from Birmingham's perspective, it's a really interesting time, because I work with destinations across the whole of the UK on visitor economy projects of one sort or another. But what Birmingham are doing differently is they're taking it from the ground up. So they're looking at what their current coaching provision is, how it works, how popular it is, and then they're reviewing it and they're saying, well, if it's not good enough, what do we need to do to make it better? The opportunity for coach growth is huge, but that growth will come from an understanding of what the industry is looking for, and whether that is from secure overnight parking, electric commercial vehicle charging points, not just for their metro system, but for private vehicles coming in, whether that's for extended sightseeing, overnights, whether it's about repositioning some of the coach parking on street and just off street options to be closer to hotels or to be closer to city centre attractions. These are all the things that we're looking at. So in terms of growth opportunity, it's enormous, and it's great to be working with Birmingham as a blueprint, really, for what the future of the connectivity between tourism and destination marketing can look like.
Mike, thank you, and it's great to have you here with us. Duncan, what does it look like from an operator's perspective?
Well, from our point of view, we are quite a mixed fleet and a mixed work operator. We do some destination stuff, we do a lot of local work, but we have to look forward to what's going to change as far as legislation is concerned, because we are about to have to respond to legislation. There's the AI stuff coming through for some of the work that some people in our sector do. We're all aware of PSVAR and where that's heading. But we are essentially, and always have been, a demand responsive sector. That's what's made us relatively light on our feet and able to help all of the transport sectors when there's a problem. It's usually the coaches they turn to. So demand responsive, I don't think there's any particular scenario that would fit anyone, well, more than one company, because each company that operates in our sector has its own operation, its own work profile, its own shape. So we're looking forward to the future, but I think we need to remember that we have to remain responsive.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. And Andrew, I know you've been looking at one of the big legislative challenges that's coming somewhere down the horizon, and that's how we decarbonise the nation's coach network. What's your take?
Yeah, the future is really exciting. I think you got underlying it, you've got a whole technology sort of aspect and data aspects and AI aspects, and that's leading to sort of like safer journeys for passengers and a better customer experience. But it's also providing us data analysis to understand how we can make that transition from diesel to electric and whether it's possible. And as you know, we've crunched a lot of numbers. We've got the data available now to do that, and we're able to see that actually a large percentage of coach travel is possible. And the whole industry is kind of ready to make the step. It just needs a little bit of a push in the right direction to get it started.
Yeah, now that's a really interesting point. I want to come back to the rest of the panel on, actually, because there is lots of talk at the moment about decarbonising coach is ahead of us. It's going to be a big challenge for all of us in the industry. But it seems to be always just over there, just over the horizon. And I wonder, Paul, perhaps, from your perspective, what's the thing that's going to trigger a change?
I suppose the first concern that people have is the infrastructure that will allow these vehicles to move freely around the country. And there's a lot of talk about where that infrastructure is going to come from, because there still isn't really one perfect solution for every area of the country. The heavy commercial vehicle market, I think, will dictate exactly how much infrastructure is put in place, and also the technology that's going to be used on the vehicles as well going forward. I suspect that electric will be the final solution. I think there's a number of other opportunities, but I think electric will be the final solution. But of course, what we do face as an industry is a slightly different scenario to parcels and pallets, in that not only do we have up to 75 people with range anxiety on an electric vehicle, which is slightly different to a pallet, but also we have a need to make sure that people get moved around efficiently, whilst at the same time expecting the vehicles to be heated, to have lighting on board, to have plugs for their iPhones and their iPads. So there's a slightly different proposition. Without any shadow of doubt, I think the future will be electric, but I think there's still quite a way to go before we see it as a regular method of propulsion.
Mm-hmm. Duncan, what do you think might be the trigger that gets it working at scale?
Within the bus sector, they've had quite a lot of industry assistance capitally from the government. We've not traditionally been involved in that sort of, I won't call it a gift by any means, but investment by the government in the future. I think Paul's right about the infrastructure. I'm not quite sure about electric being the right thing for all modes of coach transport, because there are some sorts of the work that we currently operate that wouldn't work with a current electric vehicle. The village where our main depot is, if we actually tried to charge vehicles overnight there, it would shut down the village. There'd be no kettles, no lights, no nothing. So the infrastructure at the moment is way off. Now, having said that, there's got to be a way forward, because we're still killing people with congestion, with fumes. So
yeah,
I'm quite interested to see if there's a development along the hydrogen line, that whether it's fuel cell or whatever it turns out to be, that actually helps us reduce our emissions, as long as we can get the hydrogen cost effectively and cleanly.
Mm-hmm. With your gazing into your crystal ball, Andrew, what do you think? What do you think will be the big change?
Yeah, I mean, interesting with the hydrogen there, that speaking with the Irizar yesterday, and they're working on a more sort of lower range, sort of lower spec vehicles, more affordable, which I think will help a lot. But they also are quoting supply issues and supply around hydrogen, so that really needs to be taken care of. In the short term with electric, which I would say a lot of journeys, can be done with home charging if you can get it. And I think that's what our study really showed. There's a huge variation in types of coach operator that would be able to transition to electric, and it's very mixed. And some could do sort of 80% of their work, and others could only do 22%. So there's a big range. But the number one thing to get people going is that cost, isn't it?
Yeah.
And where customers have been prepared to pay more, corporations that are looking for green credentials, then operators are making a profit, and there's a number of operators that are running electric services well and profitably. But to have a wholesale adoption, I think it's possible. It's possible to do a variety of services, but we need cheap electricity. We need opportunity charging off-site. If you have to go to the motorway and charge, and it's going to be 75 pence a kilowatt, diesel's going to be cheaper, and guess what? Duncan's going to choose diesel.
Yeah.
and the people in Duncan's village are probably going to choose diesel as well. Help them make their cup of tea still.
Yeah.
Mike, I wonder if from the demand side, you foresee a world in which more and more destinations are saying, yeah, we want coaches, but we want them to be zero-emission coaches. Are we near to that? Do you see that coming?
I think we're absolutely there today. I think if you speak to any council within any destination, of any honeypot around the UK, they're all going to say, no, absolutely, we want to have fewer diesel vehicles, we want to have lower emissions or zero emissions. And I think we're already seeing it in London, which I know has all kinds of issues when it comes to coach facilities. But we're seeing sightseeing operators based in London already using exclusive electric vehicles, and the sightseeing market is extending this out to Windsor and down to Bath and so forth. So yeah, absolutely. And for me, I think it's incredibly important that all destinations build that emphasis into their destination marketing plans. It's all well and good to say, this is what we want, but unless you can say, and this is how we can do it, and this is how we're then going to share that, not aspiration, but reality with the industry. And it may be that, in truth, the sightseeing businesses based out of London are going to be maybe a couple of years ahead of the coach operators around the rest of the country. But it doesn't matter. The destinations have to start. They've got to prove that they can do it. They've got to show that they're willing to invest in a capital level, and then say, this is what we're doing. And then as the coaching industry makes its mind up and its change over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, the destinations are already there. So itineraries are always built 18 months, 24 months before they go on sale. So I don't see any reason why destinations don't start doing it now. Today would be great. And then delivering it in 2026, 2027.
Mm-hmm. And I think important in that process, where there will be that transition process, to bear in mind something that Andrew talked about yesterday in his presentation, which is the vast majority of coach mileage is already done by really, really clean Euro 6 vehicles that have got the majority of pollution out of the tailpipe anyway. So while we're getting ready for that transition, let's not forget the quality of what we currently provide. I'm going to open up now to questions from across the floor, ably assisted by David, who's going to be roving with the mic.
Hello.
Probably asking the question yourself, David.
Yeah, I think, if I may, I'd just like to kick off talking about destinations. Earlier today, we were hearing very positive stuff about the amount of money that the coach industry generates, and yet there is still a feeling among some operators that, quite frankly, they're just not welcome in some destinations because the facilities aren't there, there's nowhere to park, there's nowhere for drivers to use, and it's kind of a bias against coach operators, whether or not you're driving diesel coaches or electric coaches in the future. What's been your experience? I'm just quite interested in that. Perhaps if you'd like to start that one off, Paul.
Well, mine normally comes from the rhetoric here from the operators, and certainly we hear of issues with passenger dropping, with parking, with standover places. They're certain. My hometown is London, and certainly within London, I can't imagine a scenario where you've got parking areas for coaches that also incorporate charging infrastructure. The pavements are already too busy. The roads are used for too many different things, and I think there would be a challenge to put that infrastructure in. But without a shadow of a doubt, we're in a situation where fixed penalty notices are part of the operating cost of an operator, and the fact that in order to provide the service and to get their passengers to roughly to where they need to be, they're going to run the gauntlet, and that's not a great thing.
Is there anything that can be done to change that mindset before you even start thinking about infrastructure for electric vehicles, to change that mindset in some areas, to persuade local authorities to do more in their transport plans to accommodate you guys?
I think CPT has been trying for many years to get coach included in local transport plans. I know I was involved in one up in the northwest, where several hundred pages of a transport plan, and the coach wasn't mentioned once. Manchester, I don't think there's hardly anywhere to park. London is a pain in the neck. We're seriously considering whether we bother going to London because we're being chased everywhere we go down there. Bourton in the Water is a really popular tourist destination in the Cotswolds. Last year they've shut the coach park. Now we had a programme of tours there, disabled access specialist tours, where we're using specialist coaches, stripped out, wheelchairs down one side, families on the other. We can't take them to Bourton in the Water, the jewel in the Cotswolds. So when we're being chased around like that, we do pick up tickets trying to unload wheelchairs because they come around the front of the coach. So we very often feel unwelcome, yes.
So Graham, from the CPT's point of view then, you're presumably battling on their behalf to say, hang on a minute, on the one hand you're saying don't get people to come in cars, use buses, but then why not at the same token say use coaches as well, because it's a sustainable form of transport.
And the message is coming through, is being heard so much more than it was 2 or 3 years ago, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we're starting to get some real traction with local authorities. So I was talking to the Mayor of West Yorkshire last week. She's very interested in how coach can be brought into her local transport plan. I know the team are talking to mayors in Greater Manchester, the North East, South Yorkshire along similar lines, and we're starting to get to that place where thinking about coach as part of your local transport plan, it is not a novelty, it's part of the bare bones of what you do, because you've got this sustainable travel strategy and you've got a place for walking, cycling, bus, tram, rail in it. What about coach? What about the children you need to move around your authority area? What about the visitors you want to bring in to fuel your local economy? So as Duncan's saying, it's been a long, hard haul, and when I tried to have these conversations maybe 5 years ago, it just wasn't getting the traction. But now it's starting to. Hopefully the research I was talking about earlier will start to open some doors and convince people as well.
Okay. Right, so I'll come to you.
Stuart Render, it's interesting when we look at the future of coach, are we there yet? And I think, as Mike said, yes we are, but only in terms of urban areas. And I would argue perhaps it's the low-hanging fruit that we've gone for to get quite a significant move towards electrification of coach. Look at Ember up in Edinburgh and doing intercity, but they're coming back to an urban base where the charging facilities are fine. One of the challenges I think we have about the future of coach, the bit that we are nowhere near yet, is anything that does overnight touring. And we've seen the Yutong coach, the GT14, lovely 3-axle coach, plenty of room for all the luggage, but if it goes overnight anywhere and has to charge at a remote location, the facilities for that, I imagine, even going to Duncan's village, is a hotel going to have a charging point where the coach can park? Is that parking space going to be clear? Does the coach operator know that everything's going to be working fine? Now, at the moment, I don't think, and it's great to see what's happening in Birmingham, in the urban areas, it's almost easy to do. In the rural areas or the distance overnight locations, and it might be that a coach doing an overnight journey can't charge at a hotel but has to go into a local bus operator garage or friendly coach operator to charge. But we're not quite at that point yet, and I think that's the next bit of future of coach that we need to be looking at. And as we develop the whole infrastructure charging for electric vehicle changing, that's the bit to go. The coaches are almost there. Well, that Yutong is probably available for that, but we're not there with what we need at the far end. And that's, I'd probably ask the panel, where do we see that going, and is that in sight yet, or is that really a big ask? And indeed, in terms of rural areas and rural coach operators, will we ever get there? It's a big question.
It is a big question. Who'd like to start on that? Yeah.
I think, Stuart, first of all, I think you're absolutely right. What has changed since, and this is purely from a tourism perspective, since the Boise Review, which was about 18 months ago now, where the regions of England were broken up for about the 11th time in the last 10 years in order to make it simpler. So they created a series of what is now called LVEPs, or Local Visitor Economy Partnerships. But fundamentally what that is, it's destinations working collaboratively. But part of that is bringing councils in as stakeholders into the area that's traditionally been run by the destination marketing organisations. So it's brought together the tourism side and the infrastructure side together, because you are absolutely right. I did a big project in Ireland a couple of years ago where they were looking very much at the digital distribution of tourism. And someone very wisely said, you cannot plug a Tesla into a cow. And it's true, you can't. If there's no infrastructure to charge an electric vehicle, whether it's a private vehicle or a commercial vehicle, it's not going to add up. What we're trying to do in the project that I'm involved in Birmingham is to say, look, if you're coming to Stratford-upon-Avon, for example, come via Birmingham where you can charge your vehicles or your coaches, even if you can't charge it in Stratford-upon-Avon, or you can't charge it somewhere else. And this I think is how the future will. There will be staging posts. And yes, fine, they may start off being in the low-hanging fruits of the urban destinations. But as of today, there are no staging posts. As of next year and the year after, there will be. And I think you're right, it won't be in my village either. I can promise you that. You couldn't even get a coach up the lane. But the point is that once the urban centres say, all right, fine, we will put 3, 4, 5, 6 staging posts where you can charge a commercial vehicle in 2 or 3 hours, and then you've got another 250 miles of run, suddenly the country is opening up.
Ultimately, if we're serious about this, they've got to come up with that infrastructure in the remote areas. 10, 15 years ago, the mobile phone network, there were lots of rural areas that couldn't get a decent signal, couldn't get broadband. That is improving because there's more infrastructure. If you're serious about it, it's got to happen, surely. There
is that. What would add as well is this all relies on the fact that operators have one vehicle for one type of reliable and predictable work, that they don't do a variety of different jobs throughout the year at different times, and that, of course, they can plan for where they're going to need to charge and make sure that they've got those places set with their drivers, and secondly, when they arrive there, they don't find a not in service sign stuck on the charging point that they're going to rely on to make the next part of their journey. So there is a lot of things that need to be put in place to make sure that people can deal with this with confidence, because the reality is that operators are there to provide a service to their passengers, not to spend a huge amount of time trying to plan how on earth they're going to undertake some of these journeys, and each day do something slightly different. It's a big ask to them.
I'd like to come in on that point, actually. So interesting developments north of the border in Scotland with the ScotZeb Fund, where we won funding for over 20 electric coaches. And as part of that project, they recognised those challenges, and we're actually starting the first coach or large vehicle charging network. And the idea of that is you would be able to search out and see where those charge sites are, what types of charges they are, whether your vehicle will be supported with them, and to be able to reserve them. And it's like a private network to do that. And also a tool, because if you're going to be buying some electric vehicles and you want to use them for more than just the service work or the school runs, you want to be able to use them at weekends or in the evening, some planning software that fits across your existing, i.e. coach manager-like software, so you can pull out your whole fleet and work out which journeys are best to do with the electric, which ones are going to give you the best economical return use the electric on that route and the diesel on that one, and stuff like that. So that's something that's actually started up in Scotland, which is encouraging, and there's a long way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a new skill that operators will learn at the moment. It's very easy to give the driver a Shell card and send him on his way. It's something else that they've got to incorporate into their planning cycles, I suppose.
So the other part about the rural piece as well, in our studying, what we noticed about coaches is they're arriving at all the same time of the day. Typically, it's a big bell curve. You leave first thing in the morning, you arrive at 10 o'clock to your attraction or destination, and you want to leave again by 3 or 4 to get home. So if you're putting something in this attraction in a rural area, you need to look for ways to combine that with other modes of transport where possible, if it exists, of course. But distribution, logistics, they need to share them. We need to set them up in a way that they're secure for trucks, so their payload doesn't get stolen, but they're also suitable for coach passengers. Well, they're probably offloaded the passengers, but it needs to be suitable for coach as well, and try and share that infrastructure, because then it becomes more of a financially attractive proposition for a charge point operator to put in.
Any more points that people want to raise about infrastructure, about the practicalities of what we've just been talking about? Yes, sir. I'll come up to you up there.
Phil Smith, CPT. It just struck me while I've been listening to everybody's comments that there could well be an opportunity for central government funding on infrastructure in some of the more, shall we say, secondary locations around the country that are in need of a shot in the arm. And whilst it probably be very difficult in the current climate for operator funding, there could be a real opportunity for places which are tourist destinations but have suffered economically to perhaps have money made available for them to improve charging infrastructure, coastal towns, that sort of place.
And it could potentially be a revenue stream for that attraction as well. So maybe you get more coach parks then, because they can make money off them.
I think so. I think that the DFT would have a different view where you've got purely, as they would see coach, purely commercial, as they see commercial vehicles purely commercial. And the only thing I would say is they've spectacularly failed to even provide basic toilet facilities in the majority of stop places that vehicles use. So the prospect of them spending hundreds of thousands putting electrical infrastructure in when we're still expecting drivers to run into bushes is maybe a little bit of a way away.
I mean, he seems to have completely ruled out, I think, in what he said, any chance of the government ever doing anything in terms of helping operators in purchasing the vehicles. Is that what you all feel, that there's never going to be an opportunity for that? Whereas they have got involved, certainly I know in Warrington, where the bus company has completely electrified its fleet, got a massive wedge of cash from Zebra to do that.
And as Duncan was saying earlier, there has been some funding available to bus operators to transition their fleets. There's also been some funding available to Scottish bus and coach operators to do electrification. That's one of the things I think that's driving the more rapid progress north of the border, because money talks, doesn't it, and it drives action. We certainly wouldn't give up hope of support for coach either in vehicle purchase and or infrastructure development, but it's a case we've got to make, and it's a conversation we need to keep having with both central government and local government, because as central government devolves more and more of its transport spend to local authorities, it may well be that we need to talk to the mayors rather than talk to the ministers, but we'll be doing both on behalf of the industry.
Absolutely. And another thing that struck me actually when you were all talking was, are we even settled on the fact that electric is the way forward? I mean, you're convinced electric is the future, I think you said, but then hydrogen pops up. So how are we ever going to resolve this, that what do we invest in? Who's going to get the Betamax videos and who's going to get the VHS? Sorry about that reference for younger people who won't understand it. But
could I come in on that one?
Yeah, of course.
I think we're talking about destination charging at the moment, which is very relevant for a part of our sector. But there's another part of our sector that does the longer journeys or just delivers from A to B and then drops and comes away empty. At the moment, when a driver needs a break, the passengers get a break, or when the passengers want a break, the driver gets a break. But they're limited by law. We have, say for example, they have to do a 45-minute break. We're not going to be able to stop on a longer journey for 2 or 3 hours to put enough power in to get to the next break. And at the moment, I know technology moves really quickly. Over the last 5 years, we've probably doubled the range of electric cars already, or the batteries are getting smaller, and that's going to change. But what we are aware of today, what we see today, doesn't at the moment cater for that part of our sector. And that's quite a large part of the mileage operated. The examples we've got in Ember, and we've got National Express looking at using, I think, GT14 down at Stansted, for example. Unless their schedules work to give them charging time during the day, it doesn't work. And if you're a smaller coach operator, because the larger ones can have a larger fleet built into the network, if you're a smaller operator, you don't have the facility or the capital ability to actually put a fleet large enough together to cater with your work profile.
So are you suggesting that the way forward will be not just one or the other, but both? That you'll have a mixed economy of...
I mean, the analysis shows that even when we have the CPT membership network where every member shares their charging infrastructure, there's still 15% of journeys that couldn't be done because they don't stop long enough to charge. So there has to be another alternative, and that's where I think hydrogen can fill the space. And I think it'll be a blend of fleets. You've got some other advantages with the hydrogen vehicle. They can be lighter because they've got less battery packs. So that can make them maybe more efficient, which kind of might counteract the inefficiency of how hydrogen is produced. But we do need to solve the supply issue first.
And I would say, and I'm semi-convinced electric is the way to go, but that's today, and that can change because we only know what we know today and not what we know in the future. And the analogy of Betamax and VHS, well, arguably Betamax was a better system.
It was.
But it lost out to VHS because ultimately society just chose one and went with it, and eventually it just becomes overwhelmed. I think we probably all knew somebody who had a Betamax system, but they were relatively rare. So I don't think there's one size necessarily will always fit all. And I think in the future people would be foolish just to consider that there's, this is the way it's going to be. But it's going to be an interesting 5 or 10 years as we work that one out, I think.
Okay. I was just going to add one more thing, just from a destination perspective again. Because we don't know, when I work with destinations, I don't want them to be stuck sort of paralysis by analysis. They need to do something. And if electric charging is good for the next 5 years, I'm delighted with that. I'd never suggest it's going to be good for the next 25 years, but then in 5 years' time, we'll know more. And I think this is one of those difficult situations where the destinations need to make decisions in advance of the industry. We just have to hope that if we can talk to each other and we can get a general sense of what we reckon might happen over the next 3, 4, 5 years, when it comes to capital investment, particularly from councils, they're going to want to know they're going to get a decent return on that investment. And the best way to do that is to ask questions of each other.
Yeah, thanks. Martin Dean from Go Ahead. Just one point on hydrogen is, I'm talking buses now, not coaches, but I think there's a lot of analogies, and I agree with what Andrew was saying about it's going to be a mixed solution. So around about 85% of our running boards work with electric, but 15% therefore need another solution. We're trying to make hydrogen work at our Crawley depot near Gatwick Airport. The biggest barrier at the moment to moving that forward is regulation. So we've got a battle at the moment with the HSE for them to get comfortable with storage of liquid hydrogen in liquid hydrogen tanks. The technology is proven, it's used all around the world, but it's a real barrier at the moment. It's not the technology and it's not the supply chain. Actually, we've got a very, very good partner in Air Products who are giving us regular supply of green hydrogen. But we can't get enough buses out on the road at the moment because we can't store enough hydrogen in the tanks because we can't get the planning permission to do that. So we're working hard to get there, but it's just a point to make that from our point of view, it's not the technology, it's the regulation which is the issue.
Martin, would I be right in thinking, I read somewhere that there's no planning regulations surrounding the storage of hydrogen. So what they have to use is CNG. And CNG in a mishap behaves completely differently to hydrogen. It goes out instead of up. But the reality is that they then force you to have sufficient space as if it was going to be acting as CNG. And it just does show that the legislation and the regulation in all sorts of different ways needs to be up to speed with the technology. And secondly, of course, what you do then have is the view of your neighbours as to what they exactly want next door. Whilst hydrogen might be a great solution, it may be difficult, certainly in more built-up areas, just on that perception of exactly what's going on in that bus depot down the road.
I mean, you're 100% right about the way it's modelled. I mean, I think we're starting to make a bit of progress, and again, Air Products are doing a lot of work to try to get the HSE comfortable so that they do calibrate their planning permissions against the actual technology rather than using a substitute, which is absolutely right. I think it's propane gas that they...
Is it propane?
Propane gas, which, behaves in different ways. So the regulation needs to keep in touch with the technology as it emerges, otherwise it becomes a barrier.
But I think that's something we all see in general society is now the pace of evolution of so many things outstrips the way in which we legislate for them. We have a process that we have to go through for legislation, which means that by the time it's adopted, it's almost obsolete because something else has come along that has then replaced it, and there's no legislation for that, and that's a challenge for government, I suppose.
One last question from anybody in the audience. Anything really burning that you wanted to ask? Nope. I think we're all done there. So, gentlemen, and Graham, thank you very much indeed for that. Loads of stuff to think about there. And the thing I'm going to be thinking about is your village. I've just got this vision of this village, and suddenly it goes, ooh.
That's it.
And everybody goes, oh, he's plugged his couch in again. I'm sure we'll get beyond that technology soon. Thanks very much indeed for your contribution. Loads to think about there. Thanks to all of you for coming here today. Thank you.
Thank you
in fact, Graham's earning his crust today. So Graham, I'd just like you to, because this is of course the CP Operator Forum, to just say a few words to sort of conclude what's been going on today, please.
Thank you, David. I'll be brief just in closing the day. I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's been on our panels and speaking throughout the day. Thank you to everybody who's been in the audience and joined in what's been a really fruitful conversation. Thank you to EBE for letting us take over their masterclass for a day. What a great way to get our Operator Forum up and running. Thank you to the wonderful David Guest for being a brilliant host. And thank you to Leanne and Keith from the CPT team who have done so much work behind the scenes to pull together today's event together. So thank you to all of those people. Just some reflections from me. I think it's been a really, really good day. I've really enjoyed that really clear-eyed presentation on AI this morning, talking about the importance of what you put around AI rather than just the technology itself. We've had some really good conversations about coach tourism, our workforce, the future of coach. We had that real powerhouse of a session with regulator, enforcer and lawyer here in a sort of forum that you just don't get anywhere else. And if I take away one thought from the day, I think it has to be that you can't plug a Tesla into a cow. What a way to remember the challenge of decarbonising in rural areas by. So I think it's been a great event. More important to me, actually, is to find out what you and others think of the event and how we can improve it in future. So do come and talk to us over on the CPT stand about that, indeed about anything else you want to talk to us about. You can find us just over in the corner underneath the big 50th anniversary sign. Thank you very much for joining us and taking part in the conversation. It's been great. Cheers.